Hey, welcome back to the channel. This is an original story from Hidden Revenge Family, and it took a turn you truly didn't see coming. Let's get into it.
Sunday dinner at my parents' house always followed the same script. My mom cooked too much food. My dad opened a bottle of wine he said was for special occasions. Peyton talked the most even when nobody asked her anything. And I sat there quietly eating slow because I knew at some point the conversation would turn toward me. It always did. That night started like any other. My mom placed a big bowl of roasted potatoes in the middle of the table, while my dad carved the chicken like he was hosting a TV cooking show. Peyton was scrolling through her phone with one hand and fixing her hair with the other. Garrett sat next to her, leaning back in his chair like he owned the place already. He had that kind of smile people in tech startups practice in the mirror. Calm, confident, slightly fake. I had seen it before. We were 10 minutes into dinner when Peyton suddenly dropped a thick stack of furniture catalogs right in the middle of the table. They slid across the wood and stopped in front of me. "Well," she said, clapping her hands together like she had just made a big announcement. Garrett and I made a decision. Nobody asked what the decision was. She flipped one of the catalogs open anyway and turned it around so the rest of us could see a glossy photo of a modern living room. Gray sofa, glass table, minimalist shelves. "Garrett needs a proper workspace," Peyton said. "Something that actually looks professional." My dad nodded immediately. "Of course he does." She tapped the picture with her finger. "And your apartment downtown is perfect for that." I looked up from my plate. My apartment, Peyton still wasn't looking at me. She was busy pointing out different furniture options to Garrett like they were already shopping. "The lighting is great," she continued. "And the location is perfect for investors. Much better than that tiny place Garrett's been using." Garrett gave a polite laugh. "Temporary office," he said. "Until the company really takes off." My dad leaned forward and folded his hands on the table. "You've been letting that apartment sit empty anyway," he said to me. "It's not empty," I replied. I kept my voice calm. "I use it." My dad waved his hand like he was swatting a fly. "Not enough to justify owning it." My mom quietly filled his wine glass again. "That property is in the best part of the city," he continued. "And you're barely there. It doesn't look good." I looked at him. "Doesn't look good to who? To people who know this family," he said. There it was. Family reputation. The most important thing in my father's universe. Peyton finally turned toward me with a small smile that wasn't friendly. "Relax," she said. "You can stay at Mom and Dad's for a while." My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. "For a while," she shrugged. "Until Garrett's project really takes off." Garrett cleared his throat like he was trying to sound humble. "It won't be long," he said. "The startup is about to enter the next phase." My dad nodded again. "I've read the pitch deck." Of course he had. My dad loved anything that sounded expensive. "So here's what we're going to do," he continued. He pointed his knife toward me like it was a pen signing a contract. "You move your things out this week." My mom didn't say anything. She just kept arranging plates like she didn't hear the conversation. "You can stay in the basement," my dad added. I set my fork down. "No," the word landed quietly on the table. Peyton blinked. "Excuse me, I'm not moving," I said. My dad frowned like I had just insulted him. "Don't be dramatic. I'm not being dramatic." Peyton leaned back in her chair. "Cassidy, you're barely using the place. That doesn't mean you get to take it." Garrett raised both hands like he was trying to calm everyone down. Hey, let's not make this a big fight." But he didn't look worried. He looked confident, like this conversation had already been decided. Peyton sighed loudly and reached across the table toward me. At first I thought she was grabbing a napkin. Instead, her hand slid directly into my handbag, sitting beside my chair. I watched her fingers move around inside for about 2 seconds. Then she pulled out my keyring. She held it up between 2 fingers and shook it slightly so the metal clinked together. "Well," she said casually. "Problem solved." My mom finally looked up. "Peyton?" "It's fine," Peyton said. She tossed the keys onto the table and slid them toward Garrett. "You can start moving equipment tomorrow." I stared at the keys, then I looked at her. "You just stole my keys." Peyton smiled. "Oh, please, don't be dramatic again." She leaned forward slightly. "Your place is full of cheap furniture anyway. We'll replace everything." Garrett chuckled. "Startup aesthetic," he said. Peyton picked up the keys again and twirled them around her finger. "And first thing in the morning," she added, "we're changing the locks." My dad nodded approvingly. "Good idea." He took another sip of wine. "Clean start." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't grab the keys back. Instead, my eyes drifted across the table toward Garrett's phone. It was lying next to his plate. The screen lit up for half a second. A new message. Most people wouldn't have noticed it, but I did, because the message wasn't normal text. It was a short string of letters and numbers, encrypted format. Garrett noticed where I was looking and quickly flipped the phone face down. He smiled at me, that same practice startup smile. Confident, polite, fake. Nobody else at the table noticed anything. My dad was still talking about investors. Peyton was flipping through furniture catalogs again. My mom was clearing plates. And Garrett was sitting there with my keys in his pocket. Peyton thought she had just stolen an apartment. What she didn't know was that the address she was so excited about wasn't registered as a civilian residence, and those keys she just took from my bag. They were about to send her fiancé straight into a federal prison. Before I tell you what happened next, I want to ask you something. Have you ever sat at a table with your own family and realized they had already decided you were the least important person in the room? If you've ever been underestimated by the people who should know you best, tell me in the comments. I read every single one. I drove straight past my parents' house and headed downtown. The streets were empty by the time I reached the security checkpoint outside the building. A guard in a navy jacket stepped out of the booth and glanced at my ID. He scanned it once, then looked up at me. Evening, Cassidy. Morning, I corrected. He smiled slightly and lifted the barrier. I parked in the underground garage and took the elevator down 2 more levels. Most people think government buildings stop at the ground floor. The interesting parts are always underneath. The elevator doors opened to a quiet hallway with gray walls and no windows. 2 security officers were stationed outside the reinforced door at the end. One of them scanned my badge. The other checked my fingerprint. Then the door unlocked with a heavy click. I stepped inside the SCIF. A sensitive compartmented information facility is basically the opposite of a normal office. No outside signals, no unsecured devices. Thick walls designed to block anything from getting in or out. Inside the room, the lights were dim and the air smelled faintly like coffee and electronics. 3 analysts were working the night shift. Rows of monitors glowed blue across the room. One of them looked up when I walked in. "You're here early." "I had a family dinner," I said. He gave me a sympathetic look. That explains it. I walked over to my workstation and placed my bag on the desk. The chair rolled back slightly as I sat down. On the main monitor, the surveillance dashboard for the diplomatic housing district was running quietly in the background. My apartment sat right in the middle of that grid. Technically, it looked like a normal residence. Nice building, good neighborhood, nothing unusual. That was the point. I leaned back and took a sip of coffee from the mug someone had left on the desk. For a moment, everything was quiet. Then my secure phone vibrated. Not a normal vibration. A sharp, rapid buzz that meant only one thing. Alert. I picked it up. The screen was completely red. Security breach detected. Location Diplomatic Housing Sector 7. Unit 15B, my apartment. The room around me suddenly felt very quiet. I tapped the alert and the system automatically opened the surveillance feed on my main monitor. 4 camera windows appeared. Living room, hallway, kitchen, entry door. The first thing I noticed was Garrett. He wasn't carrying furniture. He wasn't unpacking boxes. He was standing in the middle of the living room holding a sledgehammer. For a second, I just stared at the screen. Then I leaned closer. Garrett swung the hammer hard against the wall near the bookshelf. Drywall cracked instantly. Chunks of white dust fell onto the floor. Behind him sat a large black tool case. He opened it and pulled out a handheld saw. One of the analysts nearby turned his chair toward me. "Everything okay?" I didn't answer yet. On the screen, Garrett pushed the saw blade into the damaged wall and started cutting. The sound didn't reach us inside the SCIF, but the motion was clear, aggressive, precise, not random. He knew exactly where he wanted to cut. The analyst stood up and walked over behind me. "What am I looking at?" "My sister's fiancé," I said. Garrett stepped back and examined the hole he'd made. Then he reached into the tool case again. This time he pulled out something smaller, a rectangular device with 2 short antennas. The analyst behind me leaned closer to the screen. "Is that signal jammer?" I said. Garrett placed it on the coffee table and switched it on. If there had been normal Wi-Fi signals in the room, they would have disappeared instantly. But the apartment's internal surveillance system didn't rely on civilian networks. The cameras kept recording. Garrett wiped dust from his hands and grabbed a flashlight. He leaned toward the hole in the wall and shined the beam inside. Then he smiled. Not the polite startup smile from dinner. A completely different one. Focused, hungry. He started cutting again, this time faster. The drywall collapsed in a larger section. Behind it sat a reinforced steel panel. The analyst behind me crossed his arms. That wall isn't part of the building's blueprint. I know, I said. Garrett crouched down and ran his fingers along the edges of the panel. Then he reached for another tool. A compact electric drill. He started working on the corner bolts. Whoever trained him knew exactly how these access plates were installed. He removed the final bolt and pried the panel loose. Behind it sat a sealed equipment compartment. Inside the compartment was a black rack about the size of a small suitcase. Encrypted data hardware, secure relay system. The analyst let out a quiet whistle. Well, he said that's not furniture. Garrett stared at the equipment like someone who had just found buried treasure. He reached toward it carefully, then he pulled his hand back and grabbed a pair of gloves from the tool case. Professional habit, no fingerprints. He adjusted the flashlight and leaned closer. On the kitchen camera, Peyton wandered into the frame holding her phone. She tapped the screen a few times and frowned. Why is there no signal, she asked. Garrett didn't answer. She walked into the living room. What are you doing? Garrett finally looked at her. Working, with a hammer. Just relax, he said. Peyton looked around the apartment. The furniture catalog says the couch we want needs 2 weeks for delivery. Garrett ignored her and started examining the server rack again. Peyton crossed her arms. This place still looks cheap, she muttered. Behind me, the analyst shook his head slowly. Your sister has no idea what's happening. No, I said quietly. On the screen, Garrett pulled a small handheld scanner from his bag and ran it across the surface of the equipment. He watched the readings carefully, the kind of behavior you see from someone searching for specific data hardware. The analyst glanced at me. Do you know what he's looking for? Yes. Garrett leaned closer to the rack and removed a small panel on the side. Inside were several encrypted data modules. He stared at them for a long second. Then he smiled again. The analyst folded his arms. That guy didn't come there to move in. No, I said. Garrett wasn't looking for a place to live. He was looking for something else entirely. Inside that compartment were classified defense schematics, temporarily routed through a secure diplomatic network, weapon system designs, restricted files, material that could disappear into the wrong hands very quickly. Garrett reached for one of the modules, and I leaned back slowly in my chair, because at that moment everything became very clear. Garrett wasn't searching for an apartment. He was searching for classified weapons blueprints. And to get inside that apartment, he had used the perfect cover. My sister's arrogance. I stared at the monitor for a few seconds after Garrett opened the server rack. Then I reached for my secure phone again. The analyst behind me didn't say anything. He just watched the screen where Garrett was now carefully removing one of the encrypted modules from the rack. You should probably call someone, he said quietly. I am, I replied. But the person I dialed wasn't a supervisor. It was my father. The phone rang 3 times before he picked up. His voice sounded irritated immediately. Cassidy. Do you know what time it is? It's important, I said. You couldn't wait until morning, no? There was a pause on the line. I could hear my mother talking in the background. Dishes clinking, the television playing somewhere in the living room. Normal house sounds. A completely normal night. Meanwhile, my sister's fiancé was in my apartment dismantling a hidden federal server rack with a power drill. Dad, I said, keeping my voice steady. I need you to listen carefully. That already sounds dramatic, he replied. Tell Peyton to leave my apartment, he sighed loudly. Cassidy, we already talked about this. This isn't about the dinner conversation. Yes, it is, he said. You're being stubborn again. I glanced at the monitor. Garrett had placed 2 encrypted modules on the coffee table and was scanning the third. Peyton was sitting on the couch now, scrolling through her phone and looking annoyed. Dad, I said slowly, you need to call Peyton right now and tell her to leave the apartment. My father laughed. Actually laughed. That's not happening. I rubbed my forehead. Why not? Because we already solved the situation, he said. Proudly. Something in his voice made my stomach tighten. Solved it? How well, he said after dinner. I made a few calls. Of course he did. My father loved making calls that affected other people's lives. I spoke with the building management office, he continued. I leaned forward in my chair. What exactly did you tell them that Garrett would be using the apartment moving forward? My grip tightened around the phone. You told them that? Yes. Did you sign anything? There was another short pause. Technically, yes. Behind me, the analyst slowly turned his head toward me. I put my hand over the phone for a second. He signed something, I whispered. The analyst exhaled slowly. I brought the phone back to my ear. What did you sign, Dad? Just a temporary authorization form, he said casually, for Garrett to manage the property. I closed my eyes for a moment. Why would you do that? Because someone in this family needs to support ambition, he said. I could hear the smug tone in his voice now. You've been sitting on that apartment doing nothing with it. Garrett actually has plans. I looked back at the screen. Garrett had removed another module and was placing it into a padded case. Plans. Yeah, he definitely had plans. What kind of plans did he tell you about? I asked. My father cleared his throat like he was about to give a business presentation. His company is about to launch a very important technology project. Did he explain what the technology does? Well, not in detail, of course not. But it's something related to defense contracts, my father continued. The analyst behind me quietly muttered, "Oh no." Garrett said investors are already interested, my dad added. And once the company sells the project early, partners will receive equity. There it was, equity, my father's favorite word. And guess what he said proudly? What he offered me, a small share. I stared at the monitor where Garrett was now carefully wrapping the encrypted modules in protective foam. How generous of him, I said. I thought so too. And in exchange, I asked slowly, you signed a document giving him access to my apartment. Exactly. My father sounded very pleased with himself. Sometimes you have to take a smart risk. The analyst behind me leaned closer. Ask him if he gave Garrett permission to modify the property, he whispered. I nodded slightly. Dad, I said into the phone, did you tell the building that Garrett could make changes to the apartment? You mean renovations? Yes. Well, obviously, he said. You can't build a real office without modifications. I felt a dull pressure building behind my eyes. Dad. Yes. Did you give him permission to open the walls? He hesitated. Well, Garrett mentioned something about installing equipment. The analyst covered his face with his hand. My father continued talking, completely unaware. He said the wiring system in older buildings can't support startup infrastructure. I looked back at the screen. Garrett was now packing the final encrypted module into his case. Dad, I said quietly, did the building ask for your identification when you signed those documents? Yes. And you used your real name? Of course I did, he snapped. I'm not a criminal. No, you're not. But the situation had just become a lot worse. You should be thanking me, he continued. I just helped secure your sister's future. I leaned back in my chair. Across the room, the analysts were watching the monitors in complete silence. Dad, I said, I need you to listen very carefully now. Oh, here we go again. This is not about family arguments anymore. What are you talking about? I'm talking about legal exposure, he scoffed. Don't start using big words to scare people. I'm not trying to scare you. Good, because my father hated being wrong. You're acting like Garrett broke into Fort Knox, he said. He's just setting up equipment. I watched Garrett close the case containing the classified modules. My father kept talking. You always assume the worst about people, he added. That's your problem, maybe. Or maybe I just had access to information he didn't. Dad, I said calmly. One last question. What did you personally guarantee Garrett had the legal right to be in that apartment? Yes. Did you say the property belonged to the family? Obviously, my father sounded irritated now. Cassidy, I'm done with this conversation. Dad. What? You might want to keep your phone nearby tonight. Why? I looked at the screen again. Garrett zipped the case shut and stood up. Because what my father had just done was more serious than he realized. He thought he had just made a brilliant investment. He thought he had helped his future son-in-law launch a successful company. What he didn't understand was much simpler. The apartment wasn't just an apartment, and the documents he signed weren't just paperwork. My father believed he had completed a smart business deal. He had no idea that his signature had just officially made him an accessory to espionage. My father hung up the phone thinking he had just won an argument. I placed the phone down slowly and looked back at the monitor. Garrett had finished packing the encrypted modules. The padded case was now sitting on the living room table. He checked his watch and walked toward the hallway, probably looking for another hidden compartment. Behind me, the analyst finally spoke. Well, he said quietly, that call did not go the way I expected. No, I replied. It went exactly the way I expected. Another analyst rolled his chair closer to my station. Your father authorized the property transfer temporary use, I said. He rubbed his chin. That's still a problem. I know. The room went quiet again except for the low hum of electronics. On the screen, Peyton wandered back into the living room, holding a coffee mug. She looked around the apartment like she was inspecting a hotel room she didn't like. She kicked one of the broken drywall pieces with her foot. "This place looks worse now," she complained. Garrett ignored her. He was examining the wall again, searching for anything he might have missed. The analyst beside me leaned closer. "What's the timeline for escalation soon?" I said. But I didn't move yet. Because Garrett hadn't tried to leave. Not yet. If he walked out of that building with those modules before we moved, the situation would get much more complicated. So we watched. Minutes passed. Garrett started checking the electrical panel near the hallway. Peyton sat down on the couch again and started taking pictures of the room with her phone, probably planning to post something online about renovation progress. At 6:58 a.m., my personal phone buzzed on the desk. I looked down. Peyton, of course. I opened the message. The first thing I saw was a photo. A brand new smart lock installed on my apartment door. Bright chrome, fresh keypad, still clean from the packaging. Under the photo was a short message. "Change the lock. Your clothes are in the trash downstairs. Don't show up here again." I stared at the screen for a second. Then I took a sip of the black coffee sitting beside the keyboard. The analyst next to me noticed my expression. "Family update," he asked. "You could say that." I set the phone down. On the monitor, Garrett was now sealing the equipment case with 2 plastic security ties. He moved like someone who planned to leave soon. That meant we were almost out of time. I rolled my chair forward and logged into the building security interface. Most residential buildings use simple management software. Cameras, door access, maybe a fire alarm panel. My apartment didn't. The property sat inside a diplomatic housing zone. The building itself was civilian, but the unit assigned to me had an additional layer of protection. A quiet one, hidden inside the infrastructure. The analyst beside me watched the screen as the control menu opened. "You're activating the counter-intrusion protocol." "Yes." "Full containment, yes." He nodded once. "That will make things easier." I typed my authentication code. Another window appeared. The system asked for confirmation. "Initiate security lockdown." I glanced once more at the surveillance feed. Garrett lifted the equipment case off the table. Peyton was still on the couch complaining about something on her phone. Neither of them looked worried. Neither of them understood where they were. I pressed enter. For half a second, nothing happened. Then the security interface began executing the command. Inside the apartment, the change was immediate. The large living room windows shifted color. The transparent glass slowly darkened until it became completely black from the outside. Peyton noticed first. She stood up suddenly. "Why did the windows just go dark?" Garrett looked up. "What?" She pointed toward the glass. "Did you do that?" Garrett walked over and touched the window. From the camera angle, I could see his confusion. He tapped the glass. Nothing changed. Back in the control room, another notification appeared on my screen. Lockdown Phase 1 complete. Next came the door systems. Every exit in the apartment had a concealed steel bolt inside the frame. They were designed to engage during emergency containment situations. When the system activated, those bolts dropped into place automatically. On the hallway camera, the apartment door shifted slightly as the internal locking pins engaged. Peyton heard it. "What was that?" Garrett walked toward the door and grabbed the handle. He pulled once. The door didn't move. He pulled again, harder. Still nothing. "Why won't it open?" Peyton asked. Garrett tried the new smart lock keypad. He typed the code. The keypad flashed red. He tried again. Red again. He frowned and stepped back. "That's weird." Behind me, the analyst watched silently. On my screen, another message appeared. Lockdown Phase 2 complete. The building's internal signal environment changed next. Garrett's jammer was still running, but it didn't matter anymore. The apartment had now switched to a closed internal network. No outside signals, no outgoing connections, complete isolation. Inside the apartment, Peyton raised her phone. "No signal," she said. Garrett ignored her and tried the door again. He leaned his shoulder into it. The door didn't move. His expression changed. Just slightly, not panic, not yet, but the confidence was gone. "Garrett," Peyton said, "what's going on?" "Probably a building security glitch," he muttered. He walked quickly back to the living room and looked at the dark windows again. Then he looked at the equipment case sitting on the table. And for the first time that morning, he seemed to understand something was wrong. He walked back to the door and pulled the handle again. Nothing. He tried the keypad again. Red light. Behind me, the analyst crossed his arms. He's figuring it out. Yes, I said. Garrett stepped back from the door slowly. He looked around the apartment like someone suddenly realizing the room had no exits. Peyton was still confused. Why are the windows black? She asked. Garrett didn't answer. He was staring at the ceiling now, looking for cameras, looking for anything. I leaned back in my chair. Because Peyton thought she had locked me out of my own apartment. She thought the new smart lock made her the one in control. What she didn't know was much simpler. The command I had just entered didn't lock me out. It locked them in. And inside that sealed apartment with my sister was a man who had just realized he was trapped. Garrett kept pulling the door handle long after it was obvious the door wasn't going to move. From the camera feed, I watched his shoulders tighten with every attempt. The first few pulls were controlled. After that, he started using force. Nothing changed. The steel bolts inside the frame were built to hold under much worse pressure than that. Behind me, someone quietly rolled another chair closer to my station. Word had started to spread across the control room. People didn't talk much. They just watched. On the hallway camera, Garrett stepped back and stared at the door keypad again. He typed the code slowly. Red light. He typed it again. Red light again. Peyton was still holding her phone. This place has terrible reception, she said. I can't even post anything. Garrett didn't respond. He was staring at the door like he was trying to solve a math problem. Peyton walked towards the window and tapped the glass. Why are these windows black? She asked. Garrett walked over and pressed his hand against the glass. The blackout coating made the outside completely invisible. From inside, the city was gone. Just a dark wall. Peyton frowned. This is creepy. She turned back toward Garrett. Did you break something? Garrett didn't answer. Instead, he walked back to the equipment case on the table and unzipped it again. He pulled out the signal scanner he had used earlier. He turned it on and slowly swept it across the room. The device showed nothing. No external networks, no cellular signal, no Wi-Fi. Nothing. The scanner beeped once. Garrett froze. He looked at the ceiling. Then he slowly turned in a circle, scanning the room again. Behind me, one of the analysts muttered quietly, "He figured it out." I didn't respond, because Garrett's face had just changed. That calm startup smile was gone. The polite investor voice was gone. What replaced it was something else. Something colder, something much closer to panic. Peyton was still talking. This whole place feels weird, she complained. And why is there drywall dust everywhere? It's disgusting. Garrett suddenly slammed the scanner onto the table. The sound made Peyton jump. What's your problem? She snapped. Garrett turned toward her. His voice was different now, sharp, low. How long has your sister lived here? Peyton rolled her eyes. I don't know. A few years. Garrett stared at her. And you never asked what she does for work? Peyton shrugged. She works for the government or something. What does that mean? I don't know, she said. Some boring desk job. Garrett took a slow breath. Then he walked to the door again and tried the handle one more time. Still locked. Peyton lifted her phone again. Ugh, she said. Still no signal. She waved the phone around in the air like that might help. I can't even open Instagram. Garrett didn't move. Peyton kept complaining. I swear if this building has bad internet, I'm going to... The slap came so fast it took her a second to understand what happened. Garrett's hand hit the side of her face with a loud crack. Peyton stumbled backward and fell onto the floor. For a moment, she just sat there in shock. Then she looked up at him. Are you insane? Garrett stepped toward her. Shut up. His voice echoed through the apartment. Do you have any idea what your sister actually does? Peyton stared at him. You just hit me, because you won't stop talking. Peyton slowly got to her feet. You don't get to. Garrett grabbed her arm and pulled her closer. Listen to me. His face was inches from hers now. Your sister doesn't have a desk job. Peyton tried to pull her arm away. You're acting crazy. Garrett leaned closer. She lives in a classified surveillance unit. Peyton blinked. That doesn't even make sense. Garrett pointed toward the wall he had smashed open. That equipment inside the wall? She glanced at the hole. Yeah, that's not residential hardware. Peyton frowned. So what? Garrett laughed once. But there was no humor in it. It's federal data infrastructure. Peyton looked confused. I still don't know what that means. Garrett let go of her arm. It means your sister works somewhere that can see everything happening in this room. Peyton looked around the apartment. That's impossible. Garrett pointed toward the ceiling again. You think there aren't cameras here? Peyton's expression changed slightly. She looked toward the corner of the living room. She couldn't see the camera, but she knew it was there now. That's ridiculous, she said quietly. Garrett reached down into the open tool bag beside the couch. He pulled out something Peyton had clearly never seen before. A compact black handgun. He checked the chamber with calm, practiced movement. Peyton froze. The color drained from her face instantly. You brought a gun, she whispered. Garrett didn't answer. He tucked the pistol into the back of his waistband. Then he walked toward the sealed door again. Peyton's voice started shaking. Garrett, what's going on? He turned slowly. What's going on, he said, is that your sister just locked us inside a federal asset. Peyton's mouth opened, but no words came out. Garrett grabbed the equipment case and lifted it off the table. He looked at the dark windows again, then at the door, then back at the ceiling. He knew now. He was trapped. Peyton backed away slowly until her legs hit the couch. She sat down without meaning to. Her hands were shaking. I didn't know, she whispered. Garrett stared at her. You didn't ask. Behind me in the control room, the analyst watched the scene unfold in silence. On the monitor, Peyton slowly slid down from the couch onto the floor. She pulled her knees toward her chest. For the first time in her life, my sister looked genuinely afraid. She had spent years acting like the smartest person in every room. Now she was sitting in a sealed apartment with a man holding a gun and no way out. Peyton curled into the corner near the wall, shaking. From the camera angle, she looked very small, very quiet, like someone waiting for something terrible to happen. What she didn't know yet was that help was already on the way, but the kind of help coming through that door wasn't going to feel like rescue. For Garrett, it was going to feel like the end. I watched Peyton curl into the corner of the living room for another 10 seconds before I stood up. Garrett was pacing now. He kept checking the door, the windows, the ceiling. Every few seconds, he looked at the equipment case, like he was deciding whether to run or hide it. Neither option was going to work. One of the analysts beside me spoke quietly. He's armed, I saw. Containment protocol is already active. Tactical response will need to move soon. I know. I leaned forward and typed a short command into the system. The apartment cameras switched to a wider monitoring layout so the entire room could be observed at once. Garrett was now whispering to himself while opening and closing the equipment case. Peyton hadn't moved. She was still sitting on the floor with her arms wrapped around her knees. The analyst crossed his arms. She finally figured out she's not the main character in this situation. Yeah, I said. I picked up my secure phone again and dialed a direct line. The call connected almost instantly. Security Director's office. This is Cassidy Walker, I said. We have a confirmed breach in Diplomatic Housing Sector 7, Unit 15B. The voice on the other end paused. Stand by. 10 seconds later, a different voice came on the line. Calm, older, direct. Walker, sir, I said. Give me the situation. I kept my eyes on the monitor while I spoke. Unauthorized entry confirmed. One primary suspect inside the unit. Male, approximately mid-30s, currently in possession of classified relay modules removed from the internal server compartment. Armed, yes, sir. What about civilians? One additional individual inside, female, non-hostile. There was a short pause. Identity. My sister. Another pause. Understood, he said. I appreciated that he didn't ask follow-up questions about family drama. People in this building understood that personal connections sometimes overlapped with operational problems. Containment status, he asked. Full lockdown is active, I replied. Doors sealed. Windows opaque. Internal network isolated. Good. He didn't sound surprised. What's the suspect doing now, attempting to secure the stolen hardware and leaving the unit currently impossible? Another short silence. Then he spoke again. All right, we're moving. I stood up from my chair. Yes, sir, you're on site. Yes. Then you're coming with the response team. Understood. The call ended. The analysts around me looked up. You're deploying, one of them asked. Yes. Good, another said. You know the layout better than anyone. I grabbed the tactical vest hanging on the equipment rack near the wall. It wasn't heavy armor, just a standard operational vest with communication gear and identification patches. I slipped it on and secured the straps. One of the analysts handed me a headset. "Your channel will be command relay," he said. "Thanks." Before leaving the room, I took one last look at the apartment feed. Garrett was kneeling beside the equipment case now. He opened it again and checked the modules like he was counting them. Peyton was still sitting in the corner. Neither of them had any idea how quickly the situation outside that apartment was about to change. I turned and walked toward the exit. The hallway outside the SCIF was quiet. 2 tactical officers were already waiting near the elevator. One of them glanced at my vest. "You Cassidy, yes. Good. Director wants you riding with us." The elevator doors opened and we stepped inside. The ride to the garage took less than 30 seconds. When the doors opened, 3 black SUVs were already parked near the exit ramp. No markings, no lights, no sirens, just dark vehicles and people who moved quickly. A man in a dark jacket stood beside the first SUV, Director Harlan. He looked at me once. "Status update. Suspect is still inside the unit," I said. "Equipment secured in a case. Firearm confirmed. Civilians?" "My sister," he nodded. "No other residents in immediate risk zone?" "No, sir." "Good." He turned toward the tactical team. "Quiet approach. No alarms. We secure the hallway before breach." Everyone nodded. One of the officers opened the rear door of the first SUV. "Walker, you're with us." I climbed inside. The door shut with a solid thud. A moment later, the engine started. The convoy rolled out of the garage and onto the empty street. 3 black vehicles moving through early morning fog. No sirens, no flashing lights, just quiet speed. Inside the SUV, the tactical team checked their equipment. Body armor, radios, weapons. One of them glanced at the tablet mounted near the dashboard. The apartment's floor plan was displayed on the screen. "You've been inside the unit recently?" he asked me. "Yes." "Any changes to the layout?" "No." He nodded. "Good." The SUV accelerated onto the main road leading toward the downtown residential district. Meanwhile, 10 floors above the street, my apartment was still completely sealed. Inside that room, Garrett was pacing again. Peyton was whispering something to him now. Probably asking questions. Probably getting answers she didn't like. The convoy turned the final corner toward the building, but something else caught my attention on the traffic camera feed connected to the vehicle display. 2 familiar figures standing near the entrance of the building, my parents, Donovan and Sylvia. My mother was holding a bottle of champagne. My father was adjusting his jacket like he was about to walk into a business meeting. They were standing directly in front of the building doors, waiting, celebrating. The lead SUV slowed slightly as we approached the curb. My father noticed the vehicles first. 3 black SUVs pulling up quickly, doors opening, armed agents stepping out. My parents looked surprised for half a second. Then my father smiled. He straightened his tie and picked up the champagne bottle. My mother adjusted her coat. They stepped forward toward the approaching agents like they were greeting important guests. Because my father thought those vehicles belonged to wealthy investors coming to meet Garrett. He thought they were here to celebrate the beginning of a successful startup. He had no idea who had just arrived. The SUV stopped at the curb and the doors opened at the same time. The team stepped out fast and quiet. No shouting, no flashing lights, just controlled movement. My father stepped forward immediately, holding the champagne bottle like he was greeting business partners. "Good morning," he said with a wide smile. "You must be here for Garrett." 2 agents walked straight past him. My father blinked. "Excuse me," my mother looked confused too. One of the agents turned slightly toward them. "Sir, ma'am, please step back from the entrance." My father laughed politely. "Oh, we're family," he said. "We're here to celebrate." The agent didn't smile. "Step back from the entrance." My father's smile faded a little. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," he said. "You're looking for Garrett. He's on the 15th floor." "We know," the agent replied. That was the moment my father finally realized something was wrong. 2 more agents moved past him and entered the building lobby. The rest of the team followed. My mother whispered, "Donovan, what is this?" My father looked at the champagne bottle in his hand, then back at the agents. This must be some kind of security mix-up. He started walking after them. "Wait," he said loudly. "You can't just storm into the building like this." 2 officers stopped him near the elevator. "Sir, we need you to remain here." "I live nearby," he snapped. "My daughter owns the unit upstairs." The officer looked at him carefully. "Your daughter, yes. What's her name?" "Cassidy." The officer exchanged a quick glance with the partner standing beside him. "Sir," he said calmly, "we're going to ask you and your wife to come with us." "For what identity verification?" My father scoffed. "This is ridiculous." But the officers were already guiding them toward the elevator. My mother clutched the champagne bottle with both hands like it was a life raft. "I don't understand," she whispered. Neither did they. The elevator ride to the 15th floor was quiet. The tactical team was already ahead of them. By the time the doors opened, the entire hallway had changed. Black tactical uniforms filled the corridor, weapons ready, radios active. 2 agents stood near the stairwell. Another pair covered the opposite end of the hall. The door to my apartment sat at the center of it all, still sealed, still locked. Inside, Garrett and Peyton had no idea what was happening on the other side. The elevator doors opened fully, and my parents stepped into the hallway. My father stopped instantly. "What the hell is this?" One of the officers guided them toward the wall. "Stand here, please." "This is insane," my father said. "That's my daughter's apartment." "Yes, sir." "And my future son-in-law is inside." "Yes, sir." "So why are there armed men in the hallway?" Nobody answered him, because at that moment I stepped out from the tactical staging position near the stairwell. My father saw me immediately. For a second, he just stared. I was wearing the black tactical vest and communication headset. A command tablet rested in my hand. My father's face turned bright red. "Cassidy." His voice echoed down the hallway. "What kind of stunt are you pulling?" I didn't respond. He took a step forward before the officer beside him stopped him. "Sir, remain where you are." My father ignored the officer and kept talking. "Did you call the police?" he shouted. Silence from my side. "Are you seriously trying to embarrass this family?" My mother looked at me with wide eyes. "Cassidy, what is happening?" My father's voice got louder. "You called armed officers because Peyton changed your locks." Several members of the tactical team glanced toward us but stayed focused on their positions. "This is pathetic," my father continued. "You're trying to ruin Garrett's business before it even starts." I kept my eyes on the tablet screen. The surveillance feed from inside the apartment was still running. Garrett was pacing faster now. Peyton hadn't moved from the corner. My father kept shouting. "You think this is funny?" he demanded. "You think this makes you look important?" Still nothing from me. That only made him angrier. "You're standing there in some costume pretending to be what exactly?" At that moment, footsteps approached from behind me. One of the senior agents walked forward and stopped at my side. He stood straight and planted his boots firmly on the floor. Then he spoke clearly enough for everyone in the hallway to hear. "Commander." My father's voice stopped instantly. The agent gave a short nod. "Entry team is in position." The hallway went silent. He continued. "Suspect confirmed inside the unit. Containment is holding." He paused. "All teams ready." Then he looked directly at me. "Awaiting your order." My father stared at the agent. Then he slowly turned his head toward me. The color drained from his face. My mother's hand slipped off the champagne bottle, and it rolled gently across the carpet. For years, my parents had introduced me to people as the quiet daughter who worked some boring government job. The one who never talked about her work. The one they assumed had the least impressive life. Now they were standing in a hallway full of armed federal agents watching that same daughter give operational commands. My father's mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. I lifted my hand and pointed toward the apartment door. The breach team moved immediately. 2 operators stepped forward carrying a compact breaching kit. One of them knelt beside the door and examined the new smart lock Peyton had installed only hours earlier. "Fresh hardware," he said. "Doesn't matter." He pulled a small shaped charge from the kit. The device was placed carefully against the lock mechanism. Magnetic clamps secured it in place. The team moved back into position. One operator raised his hand. "Charge set." The hallway felt completely still. Behind the containment line, my parents watched in silence. My father's expression had changed completely now. He wasn't angry anymore. He was confused. Because he still believed this situation was some kind of misunderstanding. He thought someone would explain everything and the agents would leave. But the moment the operator counted down, the truth became very loud. 3, 2, 1. The shaped charge detonated with a sharp blast. The lock shattered instantly. And in that moment, every illusion my family had built about me collapsed with it. The explosion lasted less than a second. The shaped charge hit the new smart lock exactly where the mechanism sat inside the door frame. The blast shattered the lock and blew the door inward with a loud crack that echoed down the hallway. The breach team moved immediately. 2 operators pushed through the doorway before the smoke even cleared. Federal agents, don't move. Inside the apartment, chaos exploded. From the camera feed earlier, I already knew where everyone was standing. The breach team knew too. Garrett was near the living room table with the equipment case. Peyton was still on the floor near the corner wall. The moment the door flew open, Garrett reached for the handgun in his waistband. He didn't even get halfway. 4 red laser dots appeared on his chest instantly. Drop it, Garrett froze. For a split second, he looked like he might try something stupid. Then the lead operator stepped forward and drove him straight into the floor. Garrett hit the ground hard. The handgun slid across the hardwood and stopped near the couch. Another operator kicked it away and secured it. Garrett tried to twist his shoulders. Don't move, one of the agents barked. A knee pressed firmly into the center of his back, while his arms were pulled behind him. The metal cuffs clicked shut. The entire fight lasted maybe 3 seconds. Garrett lay face down on the floor, breathing hard. The equipment case sat open beside him. Inside were the encrypted modules he had spent the night trying to steal. Across the room, Peyton screamed. It wasn't an angry scream. It was panic. Real panic. She crawled across the dusty floor toward the doorway, dragging her knees over broken drywall and scattered tools. Her designer dress was covered in white dust now. Her hair looked like she had just walked through a construction site. She reached the doorway and looked out into the hallway. The first thing she saw was me. The second thing she saw was the line of armed agents behind me. Her face collapsed. Cassidy, she cried, her voice cracked. Tell them to stop. The breach team ignored her. 2 agents lifted Garrett to his knees and searched him for additional weapons. Another officer secured the equipment case and sealed it with evidence tags. Inside the apartment, the blackout windows were still dark. The room smelled like drywall dust and burned plastic from the breached lock. The team leader stepped back through the doorway into the hallway. He glanced down at the broken smart lock pieces scattered across the floor. Then he crouched and picked something up. The new keyring Garrett had programmed for the lock. He turned it over in his hand once. Then he walked toward me. Behind him, Garrett was being pulled to his feet. His face was pale now. The calm confidence from dinner was gone completely. He saw me standing in the hallway. And for the first time since I had met him, he looked genuinely afraid. The team leader stopped in front of me and placed the keys in my hand. Your keys, ma'am. The hallway was completely quiet. I looked down at the keyring. Fresh metal, brand new plastic tag. The exact set Peyton had bragged about earlier that morning. The same keys she had used to lock me out of my own apartment. I closed my hand around them. Behind me, my parents were still standing near the elevator. Neither of them had spoken since the door exploded. I rolled the keys slowly in my fingers. Then I stepped forward and walked through the doorway. Peyton was still on her knees just inside the apartment. When she saw me coming, she reached toward me like I was about to rescue her. Cassidy, please, she said. Tell them this is a mistake. I walked past her without stopping. The tactical team moved slightly to give me space. Garrett stood in the center of the room with his hands cuffed behind his back. 2 agents held him firmly on both sides. He looked straight at me. You set this up, he said quietly. I stopped a few feet in front of him. You walked into it, I replied. His jaw tightened. You knew what was in the wall? Yes. You knew I would find it? Yes. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Then he laughed once. Not the fake startup laugh from before, a bitter one. Your sister really had no idea, he said. Behind me, Peyton started crying again. I didn't know anything, she shouted. Garrett looked at her for a second. Then back at me. Convenient, he said. I glanced toward the equipment case on the table. You should have picked a better hiding story, I said. Garrett shook his head slightly. I almost had it. No, I replied. You didn't. The agents began guiding him toward the hallway. As they passed Peyton, she grabbed the sleeve of one of the officers. Please, she begged. Someone explain what's happening. The officer gently removed her hand. No one is hurting you, he said calmly. Then they moved Garrett out of the apartment. I turned once more to look at the living room. The broken wall, the scattered tools, the empty server compartment. The same place Peyton had stood the night before bragging about her future. The same apartment my father said I didn't deserve. I stepped back into the hallway and closed my hand around the keys again. Behind me, Peyton sat on the floor crying. In front of me, Garrett was being escorted toward the elevator. For him, the situation was already over. But the consequences hadn't even started yet. Because for my parents, the worst part of this morning wasn't the guns, it wasn't the arrest. It was what they were about to learn next. The elevator ride down was quieter than the one going up. Garrett stood between two agents with his hands cuffed behind his back. His shoulders were stiff, but he wasn't talking anymore. People usually stop talking when they realize the situation is bigger than they thought. The equipment case sat in another agent's hands, sealed with evidence tags. Inside were the encrypted modules he had tried to walk out with. Across the elevator, Peyton stood next to my mother. Her makeup was smeared. White drywall dust covered the bottom half of her dress. Her hands kept shaking like her body hadn't decided whether to panic or cry. My father stood stiffly near the back wall. He hadn't said a single word since the breach. When the elevator doors opened into the lobby, the morning light outside was just starting to break through the fog. Two armored vehicles were parked near the curb. The scene looked nothing like the celebration my parents had imagined earlier. Garrett was guided out of the elevator first. The moment he stepped into the lobby, two additional agents approached and secured him from both sides. He glanced back at me once, not angry, not confident, just calculating. Then they walked him toward the armored transport vehicle outside. The heavy door opened and he was pushed inside. The door slammed shut with a solid metallic thud. Just like that, the man Peyton planned to marry disappeared behind reinforced steel. Inside the lobby, Peyton finally broke down. She grabbed my mother and started crying into her shoulder. "This is insane," she sobbed. "This has to be a mistake." My mother held her tightly. "It will be fixed," she whispered. "Cassidy will explain everything." Then my mother turned toward me. Her eyes were already red. "Cassidy," she said. She walked across the lobby and grabbed my hands before I could step away. Her grip was tight, too tight. "You work for the government," she said quickly. "Tell them this is a misunderstanding." I didn't answer. She squeezed my hands harder. "Please." My father finally stepped closer. "Cassidy," he said in a low voice, "fix this, like it was a broken appliance. Like I could walk over to the armored vehicle, open the door, and tell everyone to forget what just happened." My mother's voice started shaking. "We are your parents," she said. "You owe us that much." For a moment I just looked at her, the same woman who had stood in that dining room the night before without saying a word while Peyton took my keys. The same parents who signed legal documents giving access to property they didn't even understand. They weren't looking at me like I was their daughter. They were looking at me like I was their last escape. I slowly pulled my hands out of my mother's grip. The movement surprised her. "Cassidy," she said quietly. My father frowned. "What are you doing?" I spoke calmly. "You asked me to fix this." "Yes," my father said. "You can tell them Garrett made a mistake. That's not what happened." My father's patience finally broke. "Then explain it to them," he snapped. "Explain it however you need to." I looked directly at him. "You signed documents authorizing Garrett to access that apartment." His expression hardened. "Yes." "You told building management he had permission to modify the property." "Yes." "And you guaranteed the property belonged to the family." "That's correct." Several agents in the lobby were listening now. My father noticed and lowered his voice. "What does that have to do with anything?" "It means I said you legally confirmed access to a federal asset." My mother blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means Garrett didn't just break into an apartment." My father scoffed. "Stop being dramatic." I shook my head slightly. "You helped him enter a restricted surveillance location." My mother's grip tightened around Peyton's shoulder. "That can't be right." "It is." My father stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. "You're saying this is about national security?" "Yes." "And Garrett stole something?" "Yes." My father's voice dropped to a whisper. "That's impossible." Two agents stepped forward from the lobby entrance. Both held folders. Official ones. One of them spoke clearly. "Mr. Donovan Walker." My father turned slowly. "Yes, Mrs. Sylvia Walker." My mother looked up. Yes, the agent opened the folder. "We need to inform you that your involvement in the unauthorized authorization of a secured federal property is now under investigation." My mother's face went completely pale. "What?" the agent continued. "You may be subject to charges related to conspiracy and unlawful facilitation of access to classified infrastructure." My father's mouth opened, then closed. For once, he didn't have anything to say. Peyton looked between us all in confusion. "What does that mean?" she asked. No one answered her, because at that moment everything had already been explained. I turned toward the exit doors. My ride back to the department was waiting outside. My mother called my name again. Cassidy. I stopped walking but didn't turn around yet. Her voice was smaller now. Please, I finally faced her again. For years, my parents believed I was the least impressive person in the family. The quiet daughter with the boring job. The one who never argued. The one they could ignore. Now they were seeing the consequences of that assumption. You said I owe you, I told her. My father looked up again. You do? I shook my head. No. The word echoed softly in the lobby. You sold access to federal property because you thought I was incompetent. Neither of them moved. You made the decision, I continued. You signed the documents. You created the consequences. My voice stayed calm. You'll have to deal with them. My mother started crying again. My father looked like someone had just pulled the floor out from under him. I turned and walked out of the building. Behind me, I could hear the agents continuing their conversation with my parents. Paperwork, questions, legal warnings. The kind of morning they never imagined having. Outside, the fog was starting to lift as the sun came up over the city. I opened the door of the black vehicle waiting at the curb and stepped inside. The door closed. The engine started. And the building disappeared behind us as we drove back toward the department. Before the story ends, I want to ask you something. If your own family crossed a line that serious, one that could destroy your career or your freedom, would you still protect them? Or would you do exactly what I did and let them face the consequences of their own choices? Tell me what you honestly think in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe if you want to hear more real stories about family loyalty and the moment when people finally learn that actions have consequences. The car ride back to the department was quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet. The kind where your brain keeps replaying the last few hours whether you want it to or not. The city was waking up outside the window. Morning traffic was starting. People were getting coffee, heading to work, complaining about the weather. Normal life. Meanwhile, my sister was sitting in a federal building answering questions she never thought she would hear. My parents were learning what a legal investigation actually feels like, and Garrett was probably staring at a concrete wall, wondering how his startup project turned into a federal arrest before breakfast. I leaned back in the seat and closed my eyes for a moment. People think the hardest part of a situation like that is the raid. The guns, the shouting, the door exploding. It isn't. The hardest part comes after everything goes quiet. Because that's when you start thinking about how the whole thing happened in the first place. And the truth is something most people don't want to hear. Garrett didn't create that situation alone. My family helped him, not on purpose. But ignorance can be just as dangerous as intent. My father believed he was supporting ambition. He believed he was helping a future son-in-law build something successful. What he was actually doing was handing a stranger the keys to a restricted federal asset because the stranger sounded confident. And because he believed something else even more dangerous. He believed he understood me. That's the funny thing about families. They think they know you forever. Not who you are now, who you were years ago. My parents still saw the quiet daughter who didn't argue at the dinner table, the one who didn't brag about her job, the one who never tried to compete with Peyton. In their minds, that version of me never changed. But life doesn't freeze people in place like that. People grow, people change. People take on responsibilities that don't fit the picture their family decided years earlier. And sometimes the people closest to you are the last ones to notice, or the last ones willing to notice. My father looked at Garrett and saw confidence. A man talking about investors, talking about startups, talking about growth. In his world, that meant success. Then he looked at me, a government job, a quiet personality, no flashy presentations at dinner. So he made a decision. He trusted the loud one. He dismissed the quiet one. That mistake happens more often than people realize. Confidence and competence are not the same thing. Some of the smartest people you will ever meet don't talk much about what they do. And some of the most dangerous people you will ever meet sound like they belong on a business podcast. Garrett understood that perfectly. He knew exactly how to talk to my father. Use big words. Say investment. Mention defense technology. Promise future equity. That's all it took. My father didn't check anything, didn't ask questions, didn't even consider that the apartment he was giving away might not be what it looked like, because he was too busy proving something. He wanted to be the smartest person in the room. And people chasing that feeling make terrible decisions. I've seen it in my work more times than I can count. People leak information for money. People share access because someone flatters them. People sign documents they don't understand because they want to feel important. And when it all collapses, they say the same thing. I didn't know. Most of the time that's true. But ignorance doesn't erase consequences. It just explains how you got there. I opened my eyes again and looked out the window. The sun was higher now. Morning traffic had turned into the usual city chaos. People honking, delivery trucks blocking lanes, a guy on a bike yelling at a taxi. Normal life again. But something about that morning made one thing very clear to me. Family loyalty is one of the most misunderstood ideas people grow up with. We're taught that family always comes first, that you protect them no matter what, that you stand with them even when things go wrong. But nobody explains the line where helping someone turns into enabling them, the line where loyalty becomes permission for bad behavior. My parents believed that because we were family, they could make decisions about my life without asking me. They believed my job didn't matter because they didn't understand it. They believed Peyton deserved the apartment more because she was louder about what she wanted. And when everything collapsed, they believed I had a responsibility to fix it. Not because I caused it, because I had the power to stop the consequences. That's the trap a lot of people fall into. If you're the responsible one in the family, eventually people start expecting you to clean up every mess. You solve problems. You stay calm. You handle situations. So when something goes wrong, everyone turns to you. Fix it. But there's a moment when you have to decide something important. Is helping someone actually helping them? Or are you just protecting them from learning anything? If I had stepped in and tried to shut the investigation down, maybe I could have softened the situation. Maybe I could have made some phone calls. Maybe I could have made the problem smaller, but it wouldn't have made it disappear. And it would have taught my family the worst lesson possible. That no matter what they do, I'll always fix it. That kind of pattern doesn't build strong families. It builds careless ones. Because people stop thinking about consequences when they believe someone else will handle them. So I didn't fix it. Not because I wanted revenge. Not because I stopped caring. But because accountability is the only thing that makes people change. Garrett will face the consequences of his choices. My parents will face the consequences of theirs. And for the first time in a long time, none of it is my responsibility. That's the quiet lesson nobody talks about. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do for the people in your life is stop protecting them from themselves. By the time I got back to the office, the building was fully awake. Phones ringing, people walking quickly down the halls, someone arguing quietly near the elevators about a report that should have been finished yesterday. Normal government morning. The kind of routine that makes the events from a few hours earlier feel almost unreal. I walked into my office, closed the door, and sat down. For the first time that day, nobody was asking me questions. No radios, no tactical updates, just silence. And that's when the final part of the story really started. Not the arrest, not the investigation, the boundary. Because what happened that morning forced me to make a decision most people spend their entire lives avoiding. What do you do when the people who raised you become the people you have to protect yourself from? That question makes a lot of people uncomfortable, especially in families that like to pretend everything is fine. But the truth is simple. Family can love you and still hurt you. Family can support you and still disrespect you. And sometimes family can cross a line so big that pretending it didn't happen becomes more dangerous than confronting it. Growing up, I heard the same sentence everyone hears. Family comes first. It sounds good. It sounds noble. It sounds like the kind of value that keeps people connected. But nobody explains the limit. Nobody explains what happens when someone in the family uses that idea as a shield. Because there's a big difference between helping family and protecting bad decisions. My parents believed something that a lot of people believe, that being related to someone gives you permanent access to their life, their property, their choices, their time. They believed that because we were family, they could decide what happened to my apartment. They believed that because we were family, I should accept it quietly. And when everything collapsed, they believed one more thing, that because we were family, I would clean up the mess. That belief is incredibly common. In fact, many people watching this probably recognize it. Maybe you're the responsible one in your family, the calm one, the one who solves problems. When things break, you fix them. When someone needs help, you show up. And after enough years of doing that, something strange happens. People stop seeing your help as generosity. They start seeing it as obligation. You're expected to show up, expected to fix things, expected to protect everyone from consequences. And the moment you don't, suddenly you're the bad guy. That's exactly what happened in the lobby that morning. My mother grabbed my hands and said something a lot of people have heard before. You owe us. It's a powerful sentence, because it mixes love with guilt. But here's the truth most people learn the hard way. Children don't owe their parents unlimited control over their lives, and adults don't owe their families protection from the consequences of their own actions. Respect goes both ways. If someone respects your work, your boundaries, and your choices, helping them makes sense. But if someone ignores those things, dismisses you, and only calls when they need something fixed, that's not family loyalty, that's dependency. And dependency can destroy relationships faster than conflict ever will. When I walked away from the lobby that morning, it wasn't because I hated my parents. It wasn't revenge, it wasn't anger, it was clarity. For years they believed I was the least capable person in the family, the quiet daughter, the one with the boring job, the one who didn't understand business or investments. And that belief shaped every decision they made. They trusted a stranger with a confident voice more than their own daughter. They handed him access to something they didn't understand. And when everything collapsed, they looked at me like I was responsible for saving them. But sometimes the most honest answer you can give someone is the one they don't want to hear. No, not because you're cruel, but because without that word, nothing ever changes. People who never face consequences never learn to make better decisions. They just repeat the same mistakes with new victims. Setting boundaries is one of the hardest things you will ever do with people you love, because boundaries feel cold. They feel uncomfortable, they feel like rejection, but they're actually something else. They're honesty. They're the moment you stop pretending someone's behavior is acceptable just because of who they are. And once you start living that way, something interesting happens. The right people stay, the wrong people get angry, and the relationship finally becomes real instead of convenient. That's the lesson I carried with me after that morning. Family is important, but integrity is more important. Love matters, but respect matters just as much. And sometimes the strongest thing you can do for everyone involved is the simplest thing. You stop fixing the problems they created. You step back, and you let reality do its job. Before we finish this story, I want to ask you something. If someone in your own family crossed a line, that serious one that could damage your life, your career, or your future, would you still protect them just because they're family? Or would you do what I did and let them face the consequences of their own choices? Tell me what you honestly think in the comments. And if stories like this remind you that strength sometimes means setting boundaries, don't forget to subscribe for more real conversations about family responsibility and the moment people finally realize their actions have consequences.
Final note. This story is a work of fiction, but the valuable lessons we discuss are entirely real and continue to happen to many people every day. If this style isn't for you, that's perfectly okay. Please feel free to look for other content that better suits your needs.